We're back to PLG Disrupt, and next on stage is Pedro Clivati, Head of Growth at Growthhackers. Pedro currently leads the experimentation process for the growth team at growthhackers.com, and he is responsible for ensuring the execution of high-velocity testing framework as well as objectives definition. Pedro will speak on why the most successful growth teams fail the most. The idea is to show that growth is all about a well defined strategy and a well executed framework. Based on real research, Pedro intends to showcase how growth should be positioned differently depending on the stage of the organization, while also measuring success based on achieved goals as opposed to validated hypotheses. We're looking forward, Pedro. Welcome on stage.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me for today's sessions about Growth 101. My intention is to be building the groundwork of what you should be thinking about before starting testing, before launching any experiments. How can you build a foundation for what's eventually going to become your growth team, right? I see a lot of companies actually just start by running experiments all over the place, and that usually doesn't end well. So how can you minimize the chances of that actually going wrong? That's exactly what we are going to be addressing on today's session. How can you build the basis for your own growth team and your own sustainable long-term growth hacking methodology, right? So without further ado, allow me to share my screen with you all so we can get started. All right. So basically, growth strategy 101, what you should be doing before you start testing. It has been said already, I'm the head of growth at growthhackers.com. And as the head of growth, I'm usually responsible for managing the growth and innovation team. That's two separated entities under our brand. And while one focus more on experimentation of our existing channels and products, the innovation team usually expands into new product lines, new countries, internationalization, and so on. Prior to that, I have co-founded Content Tools, a content marketing platform, worked at marketing on media companies. We have been accelerated by the 500 startups. I have the pleasure to work with the guys at GrowthX and Launch Incubator as well. But you haven't come to listen to my bio, but to actually the talk. So the agenda for today is actually to be talking about growth for different stages of your company, growth for different levers, and growth for different levels. What does that actually mean? So let's get started with the stages. So you might normally the journey, the growth journey of a company, it usually looks like something like this, right? It's full of ups and downs along the way. It should be always heading up and to the right. But the fact is, to make it easier for us to actually see different stages of your company, I'm gonna break that down into three main life cycles. The first one is when you're looking for a product market fit. So usually in that phase, you have recently launched your product, you're still a startup, you don't have that many of employees, you still don't have a business model that has been validated, right? Scaling and traction is the life cycle that you enter once you have already validated your product. You already have some clients, you already have revenue coming in, and some of your acquisition channels are already validated. And the last phase would be the expansion and innovation. So on that phase, you probably don't know everyone that is working for you already, right? It's already a corporation, an enterprise corporation with probably multiple offices, multiple product lines, money in the bank, cash flow positive, and etc. So the difference between all of those states are not only how old your company is or your product is, but actually from a growth perspective, it means what you should be looking for, or where are you going to point all of your efforts, in which direction you're going to point all of your efforts to. So let's start out with the product market fit phase. That phase, usually you should be giving up on quantity to focus on quality. And what I mean by that is because the vision of the founder, it's usually not exactly how it's going to play out once you go to market. And what I mean by that is a lot of founders have like a great idea and great ambitions, and they see their product doing well in different ways. But the point is, once they put that into the market, sometimes they receive a shock. And what I mean by that is you might be seeing things differently from what the market is actually seeing. So a lot of companies on that stage, another way to put this is actually a lot of companies that are super successful right now are not necessarily what their founders envisioned when they actually launched the product. A few examples of these could be YouTube, that was a dating website. Twitter was a podcasting network called Odeo. Flickr was an online role-playing game. Instagram was a super confusing mobile app called Bourbon. Groupon was an online fundraiser for NGOs. Nintendo was a manufacturer of playing cards, and even Slack used to be a gaming company. So all of those companies that you have probably heard of nowadays, because they're like billion-dollar companies on public markets doing super well, they were not exactly that when they first started operating. And the change actually happened when you put your product out there and start to actually look and evaluate how your end users are actually using your product or service. And then you realize that they might be using differently from what you initially envisioned, or even more importantly, there might be different ways for you to position, to price your product, and just to build a roadmap around that, right? So looking at that from a growth point of view, what that actually means is you should be looking for product market fit. And our founder, Sean Ellis, who's actually the guy who coined the term growth hacking, he actually created an equation for trying to measure product market fit. And how that actually plays out is your North Star metric in that case should be something like, how would your users feel if they could no longer use your product or service? And your goal by asking that question for your users should be getting at least 40% of them responding that they would be very disappointed if they could no longer use your product. So what we are trying to accomplish by doing that is actually finding the cohort of users and what are the similarities between them that really value what you are trying to offer. Right? So to achieve that, you shouldn't be looking at scalability at this point. It doesn't really matter. Neither does quantity of customers, but the quality of them is even more important, because that's going to tell you which direction you should be heading, how to market your product, how to price your product or service, how you should package all of that and actually optimize a specific channel. So that's what we are trying to accomplish at this point. And to do that, you might be doing things that don't scale, and it doesn't really matter if they don't scale at this stage. Instead, how can you do that? You can position your product differently. So create multiple landing pages targeting different personas and see which one converts better, which kind of customers each one of those are actually bringing. Or package your product differently, or segment your users into different cohorts based on different criteria, like their level of maturity, their industry, their market, their company size, their job title. like trying to actually like divide them into different cohorts to actually see to find out which ones are actually performing the best. Interview your customers, run focus groups, and even onboard users manually. That's going to help you get a level of feedback that when you were big, it's almost impossible to get. So you're in a privileged time when you are at this stage because changes are easy to make. You don't have a lot of bureaucracy in your company. You don't necessarily need to be looking at scalability right now. So that gives you the flexibility to actually do things manually, and that gives you a level of details that it's quite hard to get when you start to grow, right? So some like a really cool case built around that concept is actually that one app that you might have heard of, which is Superhuman. So Superhuman is, for those who haven't listened about them before, they are a mobile app for emails. So these guys actually decided to compete with free products from huge companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. So like Microsoft actually offers Outlook for free. Google offers Gmail for free. There's Hotmail. There's a bunch of others that are free products from big companies. So what does Superhuman decided to do differently? They actually like optimize it for performance and agility, and it's super cool to use that. But the point I'm trying to make is, once they actually like launched the product, their CEO and their team were onboarding everyone manually to actually capture their emotions and behaviors once they got to use the app. And that was really helpful for them to actually build a roadmap. But once they first ran that survey of how would you feel if you could no longer use the product, they actually only got 22% of the users saying they would be very disappointed if they could no longer use the product. And then they started to rearrange those users into different criteria. So what if we divided them by industry? What if we divided them by company size? What if we divided them by types of products? And suddenly they figure out that by dividing them into job titles, they found that the users with that were from a C-level, meaning CEOs, CMOs, CPOs, CROs, whatever that is, they actually, like, if they only interviewed those users, they almost got to the 40% of them saying they would be very disappointed. And then they realized that, all right, so those people actually have time is scarce. They receive tons of emails on a daily basis. And for them, it's super important if they can optimize anything, like mainly their email and their inbox. So that really helped them tailor down what they should be focusing on, what kinds of customers they should be focusing on, build their messaging and their pricing and their positioning around that, and grow in a single direction. So before focusing on getting more leads, getting more exposure to the market, get more revenue, first figure out which direction you actually want to grow. What is your ideal customer profile? What is the niche that would be extremely disappointed if they could no longer use your product? And once you get that figured out, then you move to the second phase, the second stage of a growth journey, which is usually scaling and traction. At this stage, again, you already have a revenue coming in, your product is already in the market, you already have a few customers, and you might already have an acquisition channel that is working. So what you are going to be working towards here is actually, how can I optimize that channel to perform a lot better? How can I scale one acquisition channel to actually perform a lot better. Not only acquisition, but how could I scale or optimize my retention or my revenue or my referral program or my activation stage? How can I make more users that sign up convert better? So all of those different levers are actually belongs to the scale and traction phase. So at this stage, you should be looking to maximize existing channel as well as validating other channels. You should be focusing on low-hanging fruits to gain company-wide engagement, mostly if you still don't have a growth culture internalized, meaning that's something new that you're creating from scratch. So focus on like the easy ones first before moving to more risky and challenging experiments and objectives. Spending most of your time analyzing conversion rates from levels to levels, and yeah, build the foundation of data that will help you actually build an experimentation machine later on. So scaling and traction, main points on that phase is like focus on the right objective, build a strong data foundation, and experiment across the board, not only on acquisition. That's one of the major misconceptions between growth being just a new term for marketing. It actually is not, right? Growth, differently from marketing, is like running tests not only on acquisition but also on an activation, retention, revenue, referral, and any other lever that you might have. So one quite cool example out of these, and of course Airbnb nowadays is a public company. It already its valuation is already on the billions. They are growing like crazy, but they have had that experimentation mindset and a way to test things at a lower with low resources or scarce resources since from the early days. That he's like Brian, the CEO and founder, actually has a saying that goes like this: there is really two stages of a startup product. The first is to design a perfect experience, so stage one, and then you scale that experience. That's it. Right? So nowadays, everyone knows what Airbnb is, what they do. We know how much money they have raised. We know what we can expect from their product. But in the early days, it was not exactly like that. So some of the experiments and tests that they did before, some of them worked, some of them didn't. But what they did, for example, they used to poach Craigslist visitors. So if you're not from the US and might not be familiar with the Craigslist, they're kind of like the Facebook marketplace where people post anything to actually sell it, right? So you can find the most bizarre things on Craigslist. Their layouts is still like horrible. It seems like they are in the early 2000s. But the point is, Airbnb usually, like, if they see a listing of a company or someone renting their rooms on Craigslist, they used to go there and say, hey, don't you want to actually place that on our platform? Or differently, if they see someone, hey, I want to rent a room for 2 or 3 days or something like that, they would also take that offer and say, hey, check this out. We do have some rooms available. They also noticed that the rooms or apartments with high quality pictures used to convert a lot better than the ones without it. So instead of, like, back in the days, not every smartphone had an AD camera or a 4K camera. So what they did is they launched the photograph program where Airbnb was paying professional photographers to actually go into your house and take pictures of your room. Social connections, they have tested, like, if they should be evaluating with hertz or with stars. They A/B tested the international expansion. They launched Airbnb neighborhoods, so people around in your in your neighbor could actually, like, your neighbors could actually communicate with each other. A lot of people were not renting their rooms because they didn't have the cleaning capabilities, and that was a lot of work. So they launched the cleaning services, mobile experiences, and even the referral program. So all of those tests and experiments were aiming towards building or growing in one single direction, the direction that they realized it was worth pursuing, right? Once Airbnb entered the last stage, they went into like completely different directions, such as launching the Airbnb experience, which is like a different product line from theirs. It's not renting their rooms. They have launched a whole bunch of different stuff, but at this stage, in the early days, after finding product market fit, they were working to optimize things or the channels that they know that worked, right? So again, a quick recap of scaling and traction. Here, you should be A/B testing your landing page. You should be optimizing your existing channels. You should be gaining traction on what you know that works, and trying to get as many market share as you can on what you have previously validated on your product market fit stage. Lastly, but not last, we enter the expanding and innovating stage. So on that stage, I like Jeff Bezos' quote, which says that if you're going to invent, it means that you're going to experiment. And if you're going to experiment, you're going to fail. And if you're going to fail, you should be thinking long term. So at the end of the day, none of what I have already told you guys will happen without failure. We are trying to validate things. We are trying to think outside of the box. We're trying to find unconventional ways to grow your company. And to do that, failure is just part of the way. But the gains that you achieve once you have reached some wins, it actually pays for all the rest and even some more. So expanding and innovating a stage of a startup or a company is when you are like creating new product lines, or you're entering new countries, or you're going to like completely different direction from what you used to have. So I cannot think of a better example of this than Amazon, which was initially launched as an online bookstore. But nowadays you can find like the Prime with same-day delivery, same-day shipping, Prime Now delivering in 2 hours, Prime Air delivering via drones, dash button, click and reorder an item, Alexa, which is a voice virtual assistant, Kindle online bookings, and even AWS, which is the cloud computing arm of Amazon, which is actually, I don't know if that data is still valid, but they used to be responsible for 50% of the total operating income of Amazon. So like they have nothing to do with one another. Like AWS is cloud computing, which is completely different from Prime Deliver, which is completely different from bookstores, which is completely different from virtual assistants. There are some ways to connect all of that into an ecosystem, but the point I'm trying to make is an online booking store is usually not really paying attention to cloud computing. But if you're able to build those different and separated teams, which in Amazon's case, they called single-threaded teams, which they are able to operate in a completely independent way and just like focus on their exclusively milestones. That could be the innovation itself. They're able to keep innovating, keep growing, keep launching completely different lines of products, right? In one of like the Amazon shareholders letter of 2015, Jeff Bezos actually say one area where I think we are especially distinctive is failure. I believe we are the best place in the world to fail. We have plenty of practice. And failure and invention are just inseparable twins. To invent, you do have to experiment. And if you're going to know, if you know in advance that it's going to work, it's not an experiment. So embracing failure in a controlled way in which the downside is limited, but the upside is at least 100x, you should be taking that bet every time. Another great example of companies in that stage is Facebook, which is an online social network. Of course, you already know that, and you might be thinking, hey, if I had the money in the bank that Amazon and Facebook actually does, I would be doing the same. But the point is, Facebook has been doing that since they were on a dorm room on Harvard. Like that's actually one of their core values of the company. Not until a long time ago, every developer on Facebook was able to run experiments by themselves without senior approval, as long as it only affected a small portion of their users. So that was all about incentivizing experimentation and innovation without necessarily bringing the chaos of what if that goes wrong, right? Will we fail as a company or only as an experiment? Nowadays, of course, due to compliance reasons and being a public company, that's a lot more rigorous. But again, they have been doing that since the early days. And to prove that, one of like Mark's quotes, and if I'm not mistaken, that was quoted on Reid Hoffman, the Masters of Scale podcast. He said, one of the things that I'm most proud of, and that really is the key of our success, is our testing framework. At any given point in time, there isn't just one version of Facebook running. There are probably tens of thousands. So the point is, like, if a new feature is launched on Facebook globally, it's not because the Facebook teams, they're only genius and they know all the answers. I mean, they are super capable. I'm not saying that they are not good, but the point is, once you test things before with small cohorts and keep increasing the user base that has access to that feature and keeping track of how they use that, if the adoption is high, if the retention is high, once you launch that globally, the chances of that actually going wrong are minimal, because you have already validated with different users. So every new launch that you see on Facebook, it has already been tested into different markets, different users before getting to everyone, right? Just nowadays, like it used to be just an app to evaluate girls or rank girls somehow under that working on Harvard. Nowadays, it's a marketplace, a dating app, and they have Instagram, they have the Oculus VR, which is the initiative for the metaverse. They got WhatsApp, Messenger, Bonfire, Facebook stores, and a whole bunch of different initiatives. So that's expansion and innovation. Nowadays, they're focused on that, but again, they have been doing that since the product market fit phase, right? So it's a way of thinking that actually, what that actually causes is that we are actually inverting the innovation parameter, because innovation usually happens, hey, at the C-level or the board of directors are actually making a decision. Let's buy a company, let's incorporate this new product line, let's offer this service, and then everyone else just have to adapt to it. And by building a growth and testing framework and experimentation machine, it actually, the innovation comes from the bottom up, not from the top down. So anyone at the company can suggest a new experiment or a new test. Things are going to be validated. And if the data tells that this is the right decision, then we bring that data to the mid-level and senior executives. And if they agree with you and the data is right, they bring that up to the C-level and board of directors. So it actually innovation from the bottom up, not from a top-down point of view. So last message for this topic of the agenda, growth in different states, just focus on the right things at the right moment. Pre-product market fit, you might not have access to tons of data, but who cares? You should be looking at quality, not quantity at that stage. Scale and traction phase, that's exactly the phase where you should be looking to quantity, not necessarily quality. You have already defined which direction you should be going. So A/B test everything that you can. Run hypotheses, run tests, run away from only acquisition. You might get a better bottom line result by focusing on activation, retention, revenue, or referral. And last but not least, big companies listening to me, you definitely should have an expansion and innovation growth team. And that's because once you grow and have that bureaucracy and compliance and a lot of like rules inside of your company, it becomes hard to take risks. So by creating a separated entity that is responsible for only their own projects and not everything else that is going on at their company, actually incentivizes them to take more risks and think outside of the box. If they find something that it's useful pursuing, they will bring you the data for you to make a decision. So that's growth for different stage. Your strategy should be definitely be in line with where you're at, right? So with that being said, let's move to growth for different levers. So what I mean by that is that's a quote from Abraham Lincoln, which he says, if I only had an hour to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 45 minutes actually sharpening my axe. So what I mean by that is I see a lot of people entering the growth hacking world and they start by running tests right away. And when you do that, the problem is you're probably going to get some results. And that will be like 5% improvement on one direction, 6% improvement on the other direction, 3% improvement in one direction. So at the end of the day, you will probably be on the same place. What we should be trying to accomplish here is actually where is the biggest opportunity right now, and focus all of my attention and resources, or the resources of your growth team, into that single objective. So that's the point of the quote from Lincoln. Map out well exactly the touch points of your customer journey. Understand, put yourself in your customer's shoes. Understand what they're going through before actually making a purchase with you. And then, only then, you start defining what are the tasks that you're going to build. So you might like what you should be looking at the end of this exercise is you will be getting a snapshot of your entire customer experience, starting from the first interaction with your company up until the moment where they become advocates of your brand. So you might be more familiar with this image of a funnel, like awareness, consideration, purchase, expansion, and advocacy. I'm personally a big fan of the Pirate metrics from Dave McClary. So acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. But regardless of the framework or the image that you're going to use, the main point I'm trying to make here is every single company have their own customer journey. Right? It's where the first interaction begins up until the end, where they're telling their friends and family about your product and service, so they should also be buying it. So every single company have their own customer journey. And that might be different, but the majority of them suits this AARR model quite well. If you do need to change one or add one or delete one, that's completely up to you. The point is, I highly incentivize you to map all of those touch points and your customer journey. And one great way to do that is starting by exactly the growth levers right here: acquisition, activation. So acquisition usually belongs to marketing, and it's when you're attracting visitors, leads, or even freemiums to your product. Activation is when you're converting those freemiums into paid users, or you're trying to make them use your product. You're trying to make your product stick. So, and retention is when you're trying to preserve them, so retain the revenue. Revenue is basically when you're increasing the revenue per customer or even creating new revenue lines. And referral is a program where invite a friend and gain more. Basic. And the first step that I would recommend is actually to map out your conversion rate precisely from one level to another, right? So from the visitors that you have on your website, how many of them become leads? From the leads that you get, how many of them actually becomes sales opportunities? From the ones that actually enter your sales pipeline or they create an account in your product, how many of them are actually using that? Or they're hopping on a sales call. From those, how many of them actually became paid customers? From those, how long do they stay with you? How many revenue do they generate? What is your the lifetime cycle of your customers? And how many of them are you able to actually create a viral loop in which they are suggesting or referring you to other customers? So actually, like, building the conversion rate of each of those steps will allow you to benchmark against your own industry and check in a deeper level. All right, so how does that actually looks like? Am I performing quite well on this conversion, but I'm not so well on the retention to revenue? And that will highlight to you what is the biggest opportunity for you to be focusing right now. Because if you're doing well in all of those different levers, but one in specifics is still red, you're performing lower than the industry average, that's the biggest opportunity that you have right now, and that's probably where you should be focusing on. Right? So aside from that, you can go into a deeper level and check exactly the touch points from each of those. So for example, on the acquisition, I could be using content marketing and leads. Content marketing and ads. Once they go through that, they land on the landing page, they fill up a form, they create a trial, they watch a demo with our sales team, they buy it, they are onboarded, they receive consulting on how to use the product better or how to sell more, and etc. And then you can cross-sell into consultancies or even other products, and then you expect a referral. So there are so many different touch points, and this exercise actually helps you see how your company, although it's probably divided into areas or department, it needs to be acting as a whole. So just one example, under acquisition, my content marketing strategy, my paid media strategy, landing page creations, and even the information that we collect, it usually the departments of my company that are responsible for that are marketing, sales, with some help from our product team. And that all falls under the acquisition growth lever. But if I do not have a good interaction or flow of information from one of those to another, things are probably not going to go well. On the activation side of things, everyone is involved, from my marketing, sales, product, and finance team. They are involved into creating a better trial experience, into showing demo, and making the purchase process more seamless to my leads or my freebies, and so on, like retention, or revenue, or even referral, where everyone is involved. That will help you better understand the importance of acting as a big unit and actually pointing all of your arms into one single direction. Is that growth is the intersection of everything that I have just told you. So it doesn't work if your marketing team is fighting with the sales team about or about the quality of the leads, or if your customer service team is fighting with your sales team about the SLA, or a bad fit, or a bad alignment, or a bad page, whatever that is. Everyone needs to be working together. So what growth aims to do is actually break down all of those silos. Is the intersection between product, marketing, data, engineering that actually acts upon any of our growth lever: acquisition, activation, referral, retention, or revenue. Whatever the biggest opportunity lies right now, that's exactly the biggest objective or the challenge that the growth team should be focusing on, right? So in a traditional company, the structure of the company actually incentivizes teams to work in isolated silos and tend to charge the marketing department for every growth issue that the company might have. On a growth-oriented company, on the other hand, it aims to unify every team members towards the same direction. So without silos, everyone in the company becomes responsible for the overall growth of it. Everyone has the same goal of growing. Different ways to do that, but it's still everyone, it's on the same page. We're acting as a unit, right? Last topic of our agenda for today is actually growth for different levers. So what I mean by that, and I could not emphasize how important that is, it's actually to build your strategy in terms of KPIs. So if you have already used the OKR methodology before, you're probably familiar with this 3-layer cadence of KPIs. Objective and a key result for the company, objective and key results for the departments, objective and key results for each individual or team at your company. The cadence of KPIs is similar for growth and for OKRs. The difference actually comes down to the kind of KPIs that we will be defining. On a growth, in a growth environment, the major metric that should be running all of that, it's called North Star metric. The intermediary layer of KPIs will be the objective. And the ideas, the tests, and the experiments that you will be running to validate your hypothesis are actually the last layer. They're not least important, but they are the lower level of KPIs. Before getting into the ideas and the experiments, you should be definitely trying to define the North Star metric and objective. So let's quickly get into what is North Star metric, objectives, and idea, and the differences between them. First of all, North Star metric. So the main objective, like the main goal of a North Star metric, it is actually to give the growth team flexibility to act across the entire customer journey. So what I mean by that is, what is the one metric that I'm having a positive impact, regardless if I'm helping the acquisition, the activation, the retention, the revenue, or the referral growth level. So that's the North Star metric. It's designed to give you the flexibility to run across the entire customer journey and just act upon whatever you think the best opportunity is right now. So that's the North Star metric. And another difference between the North Star metric and other KPIs is actually that it's focused on the value that you're delivering to your customers. So what I mean by that is, like, for example, it's easy for you to find some objectives and like objectives of a company on the OKRs, being like, let's double our revenue, let's triple size the customer base. That's normal OKRs, but that really doesn't change much from a customer point of view, right? If I'm your customer and you have grown like 300% this year, it really doesn't matter for me as a customer. So what is the metric that can evaluate if I'm actually like gaining more value out of your product? That's where the North Star metric comes in. It matches both the company's ambitions with the customer expectations. So as a customer, how do I measure if they are getting more value? And as a company, how can I measure if I'm growing? That's exactly the North Star metric. Some examples out of this could be Uber, for example, rides completed, and why Uber should be using or could be using rides completed. It's because every stakeholder involved in the transition is actually getting value once a ride is completed. The passenger is getting value, the driver is getting value, Airbnb is getting value out of that transaction once a ride is completed. So that covers all of those different lands. Airbnb, nights booked, because as a traveler, I'm getting value. As a host, I'm getting value. And Airbnb is getting money out of it. Facebook, weekly active users, daily active users, or monthly active users. So as if I'm increasing the active users, either daily, monthly, or weekly, that means that the users are getting more value. Advertisers will be able to show their ads to more people. Facebook will be able to get more money. So in all of those cases, everyone who is involved in the transaction is actually getting value. At the same time, in all of those examples, I'm able to focus on acquisition, on activation, on retention, on revenue, or referral, and it would be still positively impacting my North Star metric if I'm accomplishing my challenge, right? So that's the North Star metric, and that's the first thing that I would start to before running any task, that I would be focusing on. That will definitely give you the ability to zoom out and look at your company as a whole, at the same time to zoom in and look at that specific experiment or task that you are willing to run. After defining the North Star metric, what we should be looking at are the objectives. So objectives are designed to give your growth team focus. So it's quite hard to actually come into, like, let's imagine a scenario where everyone in the company is suggesting new testing ideas, right? The sales team, they have a new pitch, they have a new ICP, they have a new pricing, they have a new deck, they have a new channel, and they want all of that to be tested by the growth team. Marketing team, on the other hand, they have a new acquisition channel. They want to try paid marketing. They want to try outbound. They want to build an event. They want to do a lot of different things. So as everything comes in your direction, there's a lot of temptation for you to just like, let's run all of those ideas and see what sticks and what doesn't. But the point is, again, growth teams, they do have a high failure rate in terms of tasks. They should never have a high failure rate in terms of objectives. Objectives are the end. Experiments are the means. So experiments are means to an end. The end and what you should be, the way you should be measuring achievement or success for your growth team is actually based on the objectives that you are achieving, not on the hypothesis that you're validating, the test that you're running, the velocity of the velocity you are able to implement those tests, but are you achieving those objectives or not? This can take different names like obsession metric, one metric that matters, focus metrics, success measurement, a lot of different ones, but you should be clearly defining one objectives and only run hypotheses and tests that are clearly connected with that objective, right? A great way to think about that is if you're running 10 tests and not 9 of them are success, but you haven't moved the needle to your objective, that's a failure. But on the other hand, if you run 10 tests, 9 of them actually fail, but one that worked actually helped you achieve the objective, that's success. So, and another helpful way to think about that is like, you cannot get to success without failure, as Jeff Bezos said in that quote. So when you're building a content strategy, normally, and that's in the best case scenario, you get 1 or up to 5% of your posts actually in the first page of Google. Does that mean that the 95 up to 99% of the content that you have produced are all failure, or are they part of a bigger strategy? The answer is, without those 95%, those 5% that are on the first page will never get there. We'll never have gotten there. So the point is, they're part of a bigger strategy, right? So a few tips. Focus on gaining company-wide engagement on the beginning. So pick objectives that are easy to achieve and they're gonna sound really good with the rest of the company. And focus on high impact objectives with higher risks only later on, once you have gained confidence and support from the rest of the company, right? Last but not least, we get to the ideas. So the ideas are normally like, if you have just learned about the growth hacking, that's your first interaction with it, you might have thought that the ideas, the tasks, that the experiments themselves are the whole deal of growth hacking, but they are not. They're just a piece of the puzzle, right? So ideally, the ideas are actually suggested by everyone in the company. You should give everyone the chances and a voice to speak up and suggest some new testing ideas. And that's, if you think about it, that's quite logical, right? Like your sales team, it's like 9 to 5, talking to potential customers and hearing about their demands, their needs, their pains. Your customer service team is all day long talking to your customers, hearing like the new feature that they would like, the issues that they have, how well do they like or don't like any specific feature. So who better than them to actually help you come up with new testing ideas. You should give everyone a voice. They do not have the right incentives to run tests themselves. And you probably don't want them to do so. So incentivize them to actually suggest ideas for the ideas to be run on a controlled environment where the downside is limited and the upside is unlimited, right? So by doing that, you're going to be inverting your pyramid and starting from the ground up. You'll be incentivizing everyone to speak up and show them that there is no downside, only upsides. And that's probably going to make them feel like they're part of something bigger, than they have a voice and they have the chances of growing. And upgrade members to the CEO of their own initiative. So what I mean by that is like a way for me to incentivize everyone in my company to suggest growth ideas is if you suggest this growth idea, we're going to be testing that out. If that fails, you're not going to be blamed and there is no downside for you, right? There's no fee or anything like that. However, if you suggest a growth idea that succeeds and the data tells us that there is a huge opportunity right there, what we as a growth team is going to do is I'm going to bring that up to your direct report, to the responsible for that specific department. That could be sales, marketing, product, finance, customer service, and so on. And I'm going to show them that there are different ways to grow, and that the data is telling us that that's the right path for us to do it. And I'm also going to be telling them that you were the champion of that idea. And if there is anyone that should be leading that initiative under that department, it should be you. So there's only upsides. There are no downsides for the ones that are actually suggesting that up, right? So that's how the strategy could eventually look like. Just a quick recap on, let's take Uber as an example, right? So their North Star metric rides completed. Their objective for the quarter could be to increase the number of drivers, or to increase the number of passengers, or to increase the number of rides per passengers, or to increase the number of rides per driver. So there are tons of ways that Uber could be focusing to grow. And to increase the number of drivers, I could increase, like, the success metric for that objective could be increase the number of active drivers in 10%, or increase the number of new drivers in 2%. For the objective of increasing passengers, the success metric could be increase the number of active passengers in 10%, or increase the number of new passengers in 10%. So those are all success metrics that would justify if I have achieved my main objective. And in terms of tests themselves, for me to increase the number of active drivers, I could launch a referral program. I could gamify for drivers that spend more time driving, they would be earning more monies. I could close partnership with car companies or with insurance companies. I could be offering them cleaning services. So again, I could be approaching that into so many different lands. That would help me increase that metric. By increasing that metric, I would be achieving my objective. By achieving my objective, I would be increasing the performance of my North Star metrics. So that is all connected and part of a bigger strategy that aims to give you flexibility and also argument for the rest of the company, so they can better understand how they can make better use of the growth team's resources, right? By doing all of that, what you will be eventually doing is actually focusing all of your energies in one single direction. So show 100% progress in one direction, as opposed to just distributing your energy everywhere and having 5, 3, 2, 1% improvement in every direction. That will help you clearly solve issues that everyone can understand, and help everyone understand what the growth team is all about and how they can take advantage out of that, right? So last notes on growth. What is or isn't growth? First of all, it's just not another word for marketing, because it is across all growth levers. It is not only for tech companies, it actually covers a lot of different industries like governments, public transportation, banks, tech companies, service companies, and mobile apps, and so on. They all follow the same framework: ideate, prioritize, test, and analyze. It's not a one-time thing. So it's not the search for the silver bullet that is actually going to change our lives, but it is a constant process of experimentation. When you sum up all of your wins, then you see that huge spike in your graphic. It's not a one-time thing that is going to change that up. So build a process that will last long for you to gain long-term sustainable growth as well, right? Well, it's not necessarily hacking in the sense of actually using black hat tactics, but it is sometimes it may requires coding, right? So that's what I had for today. I want to thank you all for staying up until the end, and I hope that has been useful for you guys. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or on my email, there I would be happy to keep talking with you all. Aside from that, I think we still have some minutes for questions and answers. So if you want to head into the other room, I will be there, happy to keep chatting with you all. So thanks again, and let's grow.